Happy Monday, everybody. It's time for another edition of Ask Mike. Courtney Mims alongside Mike Irwin. And Mike, it is finally game week. We can finally say that.
But we've got to get to the most important question of all from last week. Why do we sit this way?
Oh, yeah, that was a question.
I think people want to know why we're not sitting back here.
Yes.
So if you look, if we sit back here, what do we block the logo?
Yeah, and it says things like Ask Ike or...
Yeah, so the visual people who are responsible for it say, don't block the logo.
No.
So we sit like this.
See,
I would really rather sit back here
Me
myself.
too. Honestly, I would rather sit back there too, but also it's kind of awkward.
Maybe we could make a little bitty logo to go in between us.
Good idea. I like that. We'll bring that to our graphics people and we will let them know. But there are more important questions this week, Mike. Come on. We got to talk about football. Our first question is from Mousetown, and I love this question. Can you give us a scouting report on Western Carolina?
Okay, I'm going to have to look at my notes because I didn't memorize all this stuff. I mean, this morning is the first time I looked at Western Carolina. So look, they went 6-5 last season. Not terribly good.
Mike, you can say it. It's
they
not
only
great.
played one Power 5 conference team, and that was Georgia Tech. And Georgia Tech was 4-4 in the ACC, and they beat the snot out of these guys. So it's not like they played a tough schedule. They did set a school record for passing last season. They averaged over 300 yards a game passing. But the quarterback that did that is gone, and his number one wide receiver is gone. So what are they going to do this year? Well, they do have their top running back, and he had over 800 yards rushing. But if you follow the two scrimmages, and they're very similar to Arkansas, they've had two preseason scrimmages, and both times their head coach said what Sam Pittman said, the defense won the scrimmage. So I don't know if their fans are freaking out or whatever. Maybe they don't have fans that go on Twitter or X or whatever it is now.
Yeah.
I don't know, but he's really banking on them being, if they're going to improve this year, it's going to be defensively because they were just terrible last year. Mercer beat them like, what was the score?
Yeah, I think it was like 49-6.
49-6. They lost to Mercer. So they're really counting on having an improved defense. And in those scrimmages, he said the defense won the scrimmage. Even though their quarterback, I don't know, this new quarterback, they've got a Harvard transfer. Guy transcends from Harvard.
From Harvard. I mean,
yeah. And he was 16 of 27 for 239 yards and 2 touchdowns. Not flashy, but okay. But the head coach says, hey, the defense is where we're going to, if we get better, it's going to have to be on the defensive side of the ball. So I think this is a good challenge for Arkansas because you've got a new offensive coordinator here. Everyone wants to see what his offense will do. So if they go out and don't move the ball well against these guys, then everybody's going to go, whoa. So you got one team saying our defense is going to be better, and another saying we've got a different offense. So let's see who wins. Let's see who wins that discussion.
I like it. I also think it's a great opportunity from everything that you have just mentioned right there to play for Sam Pittman, to play maybe some of the younger guys, maybe some of the guys who need some experience.
He's announced on Monday that the game has been moved to noon, which was a little surprising.
Yes.
Because of the heat. Now, most people would say, okay, then move the game to 7 when it's cooler. But he said he didn't want his players getting back that late. I'm thinking what he's saying that he didn't say was, if we start at noon, and we have a big lead at halftime, I can put my starters on the bench and put in a lot of new guys and let them, and they won't be overcome by the heat because they won't be out there that long. So maybe that's what his thinking is. I don't know. But it is going to be interesting. In a game like this, with as much depth as you have on this team, you would like to see a lot of guys play.
Absolutely, and I think this is a good opportunity for that to happen. I like that thought process there of maybe getting some guys on the field in this matchup and moving it to noon. You can't harm Sam Pittman for wanting to get his guys back a little earlier.
Absolutely.
That's not bad. Eddie Lynn wants to know, do you see any surprises on the depth chart for game 1? There's not a lot of new faces. There is a lot of new faces on the defensive side. I hope all of these portal guys pan out.
Well, first of all, you've got a new defensive coordinator, a new co-coordinator, and a new secondary coach. And that was all viewed as being the bad stuff last year, all the problems on the defensive side. So if you're bringing somebody in to change all that, wouldn't you figure there would be a lot of new faces in the defense, especially since they went out and got a whole bunch of portal transfers who are all experienced and all did well in their previous schools. So I'm not surprised by this. They listed 3 transfers from the D-line. One is from Pitt, one is from Missouri, and the other from Louisiana Tech. And the Louisiana Tech, that's a smaller level school, a mid-major, but he was all everything there.
Oh, yeah.
So they're really high on those three guys, so that's not a shock. Pupal would probably be your starter at middle linebacker, but he's had an issue with his knee. It's a strain in the ligament, not a pulled ligament, or certainly not a torn ligament,
Yeah.
so it's not as serious. But from my experiences, coaches, that when you're messing with that ligament in the knee, any of that, they don't want to make that worse. So it wouldn't shock me if he doesn't play at all. Just rest him, if you don't need him.
Yeah, for this game.
Let the other guy, and the other starter is
the transfers from Jaheim Thomas, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So he's been looking good. Let him start.
Yeah.
And again, that's another transfer, a transfer from Cincinnati. Is that where he's from?
Yes,
so,
and he had experience at Cincinnati. He
Yeah.
actually played in games there. So
there are 5 spots in the secondary. If you look at this depth chart, there's a lot of ors there. And the reason there's a lot of blah, 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 this guy or that guy, is because there's some guys that were banged up that didn't work out some last week. And Sam Pittman said this depth chart can change through this week. Who starts may not be, this depth chart released on Monday may not be what we see in some of these positions, depending on what happens this week. But so you've got 3 guys there that are transfers out of the 5 spots in the secondary. And they could all 3 end up starting, or there might be some ors where they don't. But again, all 3 of those guys, 2 from Baylor and 1 from Georgia, those 3 secondary guys are looking really good. So none of this is surprising to me. And again, I would be shocked if you didn't see a lot of new faces, considering when he went out and got the new defensive coordinator, who then brought in a secondary guy and then another secondary guy. I would be surprised if you did that, if you didn't do that with the idea in mind. We're bringing some transfers in because that was his marching orders when he was hired.
Yeah.
He had to convince Sam Pittman, Travis Woodson had to convince Sam Pittman. Travis Williams.
Marcus Woodson, Travis Williams. There's a lot of names.
He had to convince Sam Pittman, hey, we're going to be better. We're going to come in and change that defense. One of the ways you do that is to go hit the portal and bring guys in.
Well, I was about to say we're in the age of the portal, right?
Yeah.
I mean, look at what Musselman does, and more than Musselman. You've got Courtney Deifel. It's the age of the portal right now. You can't harm Sam Pittman for doing the same thing, for Travis Williams doing the same thing. They've got to bring in guys with experience that can fill those holes, like you said.
So we're not surprised there's a lot of new faces on the defensive side. What we want to see is what do they look like in game 1, 2, and 3 before you go to LSU.
Exactly. And I can't harm Sam Pittman for putting a lot of ors, because he might have a lot of question marks of what these guys will look like in a live game scenario. So that makes complete sense to me. All right. Steve Thomas sent me an email this week.
He's mad.
He's mad. Dude's mad. Dude's mad. Okay, this is what he said, and I wanted to include it, so I hope I'm not embarrassing him by putting this email in, but I like what he said. So he writes to me, Courtney, the next time some yo-yo wants to complain about hiring Dan Enos, you might want to remind them that Nick Saban is not in the habit of hiring slouches. Dan Enos was the QB and assistant head coach at Alabama for the 2018 season, and they went 13-0 that year. So, look, there's his rant right there.
And when you look back at Enos, I mean, his first year was really good. That was the 2015 season. That was the year that they went on that really good run, sort of middle to the end of the year, where they beat Tennessee at Tennessee. And I have to tell you, that's one of the most impressive jobs of play calling I've ever seen an offensive coordinator do, and this is why. Tennessee ran the opening kickoff back. Now, there's 102,000 people there. Alyssa and I were down on the field shooting. Okay, we're both standing there. We watch them run the opening kickoff back. I said, Arkansas is going to get killed in this game. When the other team is at home and they run the opening kickoff back in front of this many fans, you're not coming back from that.
No, it's not good.
It shows how stupid I was. Then Arkansas flubbed the return and ended up, I think, inside the 10-yard line, went 3 and out and had to kick. And so now Tennessee has the ball again very quickly on about the 45 or whatever of Arkansas. And I think it took them 3 or 4 plays to score. So now we're about a minute into the game and it's already 14-0. I said, whatever I said before, it's worse now. It's going to be a bigger blowout. And then what happened was they came back out on the field, and the play calling was unbelievable. It was just 3 yards here, 5 yards there, need a pass, need a run, do this, do that. They very methodically went down the field with Brandon Allen at quarterback and just went down the field, and you could just feel the air going out of the fans in that stadium because they were ready for another quick touchdown, and all of a sudden it's now 14-7. The defense gets fired up, comes back out, and forces them to punt. Arkansas gets the ball back, and they score again, and now it's tied. And Arkansas ended up with the lead at halftime, and I'm going, what happened in this game? And it was Dan Enos and his play calling and the fact that Brandon Allen had been through the ringer at that point. He had been, I mean, this kid started against Alabama as a true freshman and got sacked like 5 times. He had all kinds of problems. He got hurt the next year and had to play the whole year with a sprained shoulder, and they had to deaden his shoulder. He had all these problems. Now he's got a new offensive coordinator that believes in him, and go back and look at what he did that season. And the guy's still in the NFL.
Oh, yeah.
He's a backup, he's still there.
He's making money, too.
So,
hey.
I mean, Dan Enos won me over that year. Now, the next year was the year that Arkansas fans will remember this, where Brett Bielema decided to sit on halftime leads. They had all these halftime leads, and he would sit on them, and then they would lose the game.
Yeah.
That's not on Dan Enos. By the time his 3rd year rolled around, that team had run out of steam. And I don't blame any of that on Enos. And he certainly bounced back after that and went on to have success at Alabama. Where'd he go next? Miami?
Miami and then Maryland.
And then Maryland. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm really looking forward to what he can do this year.
I think so as well. And I think that, you kind of have to understand, and this is the point I was making last week, it's a different situation, right? You have a different head coach that you're working under, and you have different players. KJ Jefferson likes him. Rocket Sanders, if you talk to any of the offensive guys, they all glow about him. They all tell you.
Quarterbacks like this guy.
They like him. And that, to me, when you have a quarterback like KJ Jefferson, who is arguably one of the best in college football, arguably one of the best in the SEC, you like to hear that he likes the guy that is his OC.
Yeah.
I can't disagree with that. And we'll see. Again, like we said last week, Mike, we will go back and say sorry. If
we're wrong.
If we are wrong, we will publicly say that we are sorry and wrong about that. T.L. Slayton wants to know, did Pittman's gamble to be more physical in camp this season pay off? I noticed that he said last week that the team is pretty beat up.
I watched, and I don't know how many times you were out there last year, but I was out there most of those practices last year, and I've been to most of them this year. There was an absolute difference. Now, we didn't see the 2 scrimmages, but he did scrimmage twice this year and didn't do that last year. And his stated reason for that was he didn't want to get the team injured, beat up, want a healthy team at the start of the year. But more than that, even when we're not talking about scrimmaging, they were sort of scrimmaging. Even in those early periods, there was a lot of contact going on. Mm-hmm. We saw guys knocked to the ground several times. Intense. And so it was a physical 2 weeks, and it continued last week and the first week after school started because they had several more guys get knocked down or whatever. So I'm not surprised that there are some guys that were kind of missing, an injury here, a little injury there. They only lost 1 guy for the season. That was surprising to me. So right off the bat, I think the gamble pays off because you don't end up with some of these long-term injuries. And the most significant thing he said last week was he did not anticipate any of these guys that sat out of those practices last week to miss the game.
Yes.
So right now it looks like they're all available. So if you told me they're going to be more physical, they're not only going to scrimmage, they're going to be more physical in practice, they're going to do more tackling, running backs and receivers getting hit hard. Now they laid off the quarterbacks. You always do that, but most teams do that. If you told me they were going to do that and they would get 1 major injury and the rest of them are just bumps, and I would say, yeah, it's worth it.
Yeah, I think absolutely. And you're right. The physicality did change 180 from last year because I was at a lot of those last year too. And I remember thinking, oh, okay, this is practice. All right. But this year I was like, you walk in and you're watching them hit each other. It's like it was a big switch, so I agree completely. Pigsby asks, with his expertise, does Coach Pittman work with the offensive line, or does he allow his position coaches full control?
I don't think any coach allows his assistants full control of anything.
Yeah.
The problem with a question like that is you would have to be in their coaches' meetings. You can't just determine that by watching what goes on at practice for 15 or 20 minutes. Here's what I have observed. You've probably seen it. He moves around a lot. What I've seen is there's less correcting on his part for an entire unit than a specific player. Like there might be a blocking drill going on or a defensive line drill going on. And he might come up and watch and then talk to a player, you did this, you need to do that. That's not really correcting the position coach. That's just correcting the player. I think it's a good look because it shows your head coach is involved in everything. Frank Broyles used to do that. He let his coaches coach, but he would move around from position to position. If he needed to say something, he would. So I think that's good. But again, we're not there in those meetings. So we don't know how much he says to a Dan Enos, okay, you've been doing this, but I'd like you to do that. To a Travis Williams, I'd like to see more of this or that. So the question is not completely answerable because we're not there when it really happens. When he would really sit down over a conference table and talk to an assistant coach and correct them on something or move them in a little bit of a different direction.
Yeah, you're right on that because when I was at practice, I think it was last week, I was watching him with the tight ends, and he was saying overall to the tight ends, he was speed, speed, speed. Remember that, speed, speed, speed. And it wasn't correcting anything that Morgan Turner was doing.
Right.
It was just basically offering his, hey, this is what I want you guys to emphasize. This is what I want you to think about. But you're right, he doesn't overshadow, I feel like, what those guys
most
are
of the time,
doing.
I don't see him talking to a whole unit. I'm not saying he doesn't do that. But most of the time I see him looking at a specific player that was involved in a drill. He's standing there watching and he makes a correction to that player.
Yeah, I've seen
just
that.
Like his assistant coach would, his position coach would.
I have seen that happen as well, Mike. I like how he does that. That to me, that is the way you should do it as a head coach. Hog Redneck asks, what is the biggest change we're about to see from last year?
That's a really tough question to answer. You'd start off by saying probably D-line, because D-line was an issue. They've got so much depth there. 6, 7 guys to play. And it's going to be a 4-man front instead of a 3-man front. And the anticipation is not only are they going to blitz more, but there's going to be more pressure from the down linemen that they're better able to do that. So if we just look at what we think is going to happen, I would say that would probably be the biggest change. More pressure on opposing quarterbacks, more TFLs in the backfield, throwing guys for losses. That's what I anticipate. But I also think you're going to see a big difference in the offense from this thing I keep talking about, which is, and I don't know what they call it. I don't know what Enos refers to it as. I've never seen anybody ask him that. And he's only in a press conference once, and I wasn't there that day, or I would have asked him. But whatever he calls this, it's an air raid look. It's a Mike Leach type Texas Tech air raid thing. I got a buddy. He posts as Eddie Lynn on this website.
Yeah.
He's a big Arkansas fan, but he lives in Lubbock, and he was always telling me about Leach when he was first there. And he didn't start off thinking much about Mike Leach, but he was talking about how they're running this really weird offense where they throw the ball into the backfield all the time, and then they got all these tight ends and running backs, receivers.
Yeah.
You're throwing to a running back, but you got receivers out there, you got a tight end out there, and they do all this blocking and they're picking guys, and then you're supposed to pick your way through it. And he was trying to describe this to me, and I'd never seen it, and I'm like, that sounds weird to me. And he said, well, he calls it more of a running game that starts with a pass. Well, that's what they've been doing. And I've seen, for instance, what some of these Rashad Dubinion, R-Dub, I've seen what he can do. Mm-hmm. And this is a guy that would normally be on the bench a lot because he's not a starter. Dominique Johnson, we've seen him in that role. So he's going to involve guys because they've got so much depth at running back, but you've got Rocket who's going to get most of the snaps. So you're taking guys off the bench and putting them back there as receivers. And then all of a sudden they've got their running ability and they've got blockers in front of them. And what I saw with R-Dub in particular a couple of times was he would see a little crease. They're coming up to stop that thing. If you get through that crease, there's nobody between you and the goal line. So if that works the way they want it to work, I think that's going to be one of the biggest changes in this offense. I don't know if it'll happen. I'll be looking for it and seeing if it happens.
I think from everything we've seen so far in practice, it looks like it's leading that way. But that's a real fun, dynamic offense too. I mean, it's going to be really fun to watch.
A lot of times if the defense playing it well, the guy just gets cracked in the head after 1 or 2 yards, and we've seen that a lot. Because they've been coming, they've been very aggressive in stopping that. But what you'll see is they'll get a couple of hard stops, and then all of a sudden, there's a seam, and here goes. Dominic did that. I saw him do it once.
And the running backs, I've noticed this too, when they break out for drills, right, and do different drills, every time I'm looking at the running backs, they're working on blocking. I'm like, what are they doing carries? They're just working on blocking. But I think that all leads into exactly what you're saying about. So Edward Clutch wants to know, what's the deal with lack of air conditioning in the indoor practice facility? As hot as Arkansas summers tend to get, shouldn't this have been something that was put in when the thing was built?
Yeah, it was built sometime back in the 90s. If you go back that far back into time, here was the common thought on the part of coaches, and I know it went all the way back to and probably before when I was in high school. The idea was coaches were worried about this. You got these first 2 games in September when it's generally very hot. You want your guys to not get into that heat and wilt and have bad second half. Like they come back out of halftime and they're out of juice and they got no energy, and then you get beat. So the idea was you expose them a whole lot in August to that heat and humidity, because that's what you're going to have to play under for 2 weeks. Well, it was an interesting theory, but it wasn't based on any medical science. And the way this developed, athletic trainers who pay more attention to what doctors tell them, and there are doctors, believe it or not, that do research into this sort of thing. And what the doctors were telling the athletic trainers is this is the absolute worst thing you can do. Because what started, there's a cumulative effect of heat and humidity on the body. The first day it's one thing. The second day it gets worse. The third day it's worse than that. The fourth day it's even worse than that. Your body has to repair itself at night. If you're a football player and you go out and go through the stress, and back then you had 2-a-days, so you go through the stress of all that, then you go back and you go to sleep. There was so much damage being done with that stress that they were under that the body wasn't repairing itself 100%. So players were actually wearing down as camp progressed. This caused more injuries. They didn't know at the time, why are so many guys hurt? And it was usually muscle injuries, things like that. But that got worse. But what they didn't realize until doctors started telling them this was, you're actually going to put a bunch of guys on the field at the end of that are going to be worn down. They're not going to be better able to handle the stress. They're worn down from all that. So somebody came up with the better plan, which is, let's take that stress off of them, keep them in good top shape, and then we can deal with 1 game or 2 games. Because what do they do now? You go out there, you may not have been exposed to that heat and humidity in August, but you get out there the first game, what do? They got plenty of water out there. They encourage you to hydrate. And then they, in effect, got air conditioners out there, because they take that ice and all that stuff and they blow air through them. So you've been out on the field for a few minutes. You go and you sit down and they cool you off again. Because they're trying to take stress off the body. And it's better to let your body get exposed to that and then recover from it in between possessions than to send a bunch of guys out on the field who've had a month of wearing you down. So I don't know who was the first school to come up with the idea of putting air conditioning into their indoor, but I know Alabama's already done it. And I think, truthfully, I think Arkansas is late in the game in doing this. I think there are people that'll think, oh, this is bad. They're wuss bags. They won't be able to do this or that. It's actually a good thing that they're doing.
Absolutely. And it is, to be fair, it is, even if they go inside. Remember the one day we went inside because it was really hot outside and they were still practicing there? It was 85 degrees in there.
It's not like you're
It was hot. Jacob's shaking his head over there. Yeah, it was really hot. We were sweating.
It's not as bad as being outside.
Not as bad, but it was hot. It really was.
I don't think the air conditioner was working right that day.
No. Well, they were still working on it that day.
Okay, well, that's
they were
why.
still working on it.
Come on. I bet it's probably nice now.
I hope so.
And the other reason to do this is because media goes to these things, and we don't want to be out there roasting.
That's what I'm saying.
It wears me down.
I'm happy for
then
the AC.
I come to work
Don't
and I
take
get
that
mad
away.
at you.
Come to work and get mad at me because you're so hot. We'll report back to you if the AC is working. Maybe we'll send Jacob over there for practice today and see if it is working and nice and cool in there today. South Carolina Hog asks, did you attend the 1978 Orange Bowl and the 2000 Cotton Bowl? Was it true that Coach Broyles was nervous as a spectator and would not watch the Razorback football games live during his tenure as athletic director? He has a couple more questions. I saw Coach Broyles on the field before the 2000 Cotton Bowl alongside Darrell Royal. Was Coach Broyles present for the 1978 Orange Bowl?
Yeah,
Orange Bowl. Ugh, can't talk.
Yeah, I was at both of those games. Now, I have to tell you, I don't look around for Coach Broyles to see if he's there.
Mike's just like,
that's not my priority.
Mike's with his little binoculars.
However, he was at the 2000 game, and I was told by somebody that was there that he did get up and walk out for a time because he said he had heart palpitations. In other words, he didn't have, I mean, he was probably nervous. But here was the thing about Coach Broyles. He's coaching all those years. He steps down. He's only the athletic director. Well, he went straight from that to being a color analyst for ABC with Keith Jackson as the main commentator, and he did that for several years. So there was no opportunity for him to be nervous. He usually wasn't doing an Arkansas game, and the few times he did, I don't know what he did when he was on the air. He was working or whatever. But as far as that 78 game, because I went back and asked the sports information director at the time, Rick Schaefer, was he there? And he said he was not there.
Oh.
He said he was doing color commentary for ABC in the Rose Bowl. So he was at the Rose Bowl game on January 1st of 78.
Wow.
So he wasn't there. But it wasn't because he was nervous. It wasn't until he stopped doing the color commentary that he realized he had this problem. When he first started going to Arkansas games after he stopped doing that, that's when he started telling people, because the people were asking, somebody saw him walking, and he mostly did it in Fayetteville, by the way. Somebody was driving by the stadium, saw him out walking around while the game was going on. They were, well, did he get kicked out of the stadium? What's going on? They thought maybe he yelled at somebody and got kicked out. No. And then he came up with the explanation that he gets nervous, so he just goes and walks.
Okay.
Now, he didn't do that all the time, believe me.
Okay.
But it was a thing for a while, but it was never to the point where he didn't go to games. He would just sometimes get up and leave if the pressure got too much.
I understand that. It's a stressful situation. I get it. I don't blame him for that. I get nervous during games too. My palms get sweaty and I have to shake it out a little bit.
But he was at the 2000 Cotton Bowl game. He was not at the 78 Orange Bowl because he had another obligation.
Makes sense. I didn't know that. Marty Bird's Proxy asks, what is the outlook for some Razorback sports that get less coverage in their upcoming seasons?
The only ones I know of right now, soccer started off. They won their first two, and then they went to Notre Dame Sunday.
Yeah.
And Notre Dame was ranked 13th. I think
12th.
They were 12th.
Notre Dame was ranked 12th, yeah.
They were 10th, and that ended up in a tie. So I guess they're off to a good start. They would have liked to have won that game.
They would have liked to have won that game.
And then volleyball is off to a really good start. I think they won 2 home games, and they've got Wisconsin coming in. They're really good.
Yeah, they're ranked number 2 in the nation right now.
Yeah. And the only other one of those and it's not underway yet, swimming doesn't start until the end of September.
Okay.
So I'm not sure about them yet. But the 2 of them are off to a pretty good start.
I don't know if volleyball is still in the top 25. I'll have to check this week. But they started the season going into the preseason. They made it into the top 25.
Well, they should still be there because they're unbeaten.
Exactly. That's the first time that's happened, Mike, since 1999.
But a lot of these sports that you're talking about are spring sports, or they call them Olympic sports, but they're really spring sports, so they're not officially competing right now.
Exactly. But hey, good news for soccer and volleyball. And we cover them a lot. So if you watch the Pig Trail Nation, you know that we give them a lot of love, and we'll keep you updated with how they're doing. I love this question. This is from Terry Marshall, and he wants to know, what single event do you believe has had the most impact on college athletics and why? And before you answer, Mike, can I tell the folks who Terry Marshall is?
Sure.
Because his son, Josh Marshall, is a director here at KNWA and helps us out with Ask Mike, runs our graphics sometimes. And his dad used to be a really good baseball player. He got drafted in the 1982 MLB draft, 5 spots behind Dave Van Horn. Okay. So I just thought that was a little fun fact for you, but you can go on with answering his question.
Now, give me the question again.
Okay, what single event do you believe has had the most impact on college athletics?
See, I hesitate to call this an event, but I guess it was. The Supreme Court decision on NIL, to me, is the single biggest thing that's happened.
That's an event.
In the time that I've covered college athletics.
That's an event, yeah.
Because of what it led to. And here's the thing. I don't want to go back into this again because I've talked over and over again, but I just want to briefly mention that Sam Pittman, last week when he was being asked about the portal transfer and what he looks for when he looks into the portal and tries to figure out who they're going to try to pull out of the portal. One of the things he said was, sometimes when you're interviewing a player that's in the portal, the first thing you realize is they are in the portal to see how much money they can make, because that's their first question. It's their most important issue. He said, we don't continue conversations with people like that.
Wow.
If they're not, we understand them asking about NIL money, but if that's the main thing, in other words, if we get the impression the school they end up with is the school that offers the most NIL money, they don't want them, because they want other things to be a factor too. We like your school, we like your coaches, we watched your offense, whatever. He doesn't feel like they'll have good success with a player that's simply looking for more money. But I'm worried that this is going to become more and more a thing. I don't have statistics. There's nobody's done a survey on this that I know of. So I don't know what percentage of guys that go into the portal, the NIL money is a major factor on where they go. But I'm thinking it's going to become more and more a bigger deal in the future until they deal with this. So do we want to end up with a future in which you're just buying players? You're buying guys out of high school, but you're also buying guys out of the portal. I don't think any of us want that, except for a few radicals that think players need to make as much money as possible because they somehow don't like the idea that a coach makes $6 million, but a player. And I was talking to somebody about, maybe we were eating last night, all of us, the staff, and I pointed out that even at a school like Arkansas, when you end up talking about your 4 years if you're there 4 years, what that's worth.
We were talking about that.
That's like $200,000 that you're getting. That's not chicken feed.
No.
And you're now getting NIL money on top of that. So I don't think players are just getting taken advantage of, especially if you compare them to what went on in the past.
Yeah.
So that was probably the biggest single event, and it's going to have to be dealt with or they're going to ruin college athletics, I think, especially football.
Absolutely. It's heading down that path. I mean, you've said it so many times on the show, Mike. We are heading into college athletics being more like the NFL, the NBA, the MLB, rather than college athletics.
Which is what most college athletic fans love. They like the difference between pro sports and this.
There is something to be said, and I've said it on the show before, there's something to be said when an athlete just goes to a college, he gets a scholarship, yay, he gets an education, and he plays because he loves it, right? Or she plays because she loves it.
And then he becomes an alum and comes back to games and brings his kids to games. And so you don't want to ever give that up.
I know.
But I feel like I have to mention another event, so to speak.
Okay.
And that would be Arkansas leaving the Southwest Conference to go to the SEC. That was a huge long-term effect on football, and here's why. When it happened, all these Southwest Conference schools were making fun of them. You guys go ahead, bye-bye, don't let the door hit you. Grant Taft said that. Don't let the door, Grant Taft was an idiot, Baylor's coach. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. They weren't laughing and saying the same thing 2 years later when the Southwest Conference vanished.
Yeah.
And so that event, even though it took 2 years to happen, and the reason I think it took 2 years is because Coach Broyles was about 2 years ahead of everybody else anyway, and he could see all these problems coming. So Arkansas goes to the SEC. 2 years later, 2 conferences basically go away. That'd be the Big 8 and the SWC. Now, the Big 8 didn't technically go away because they took it and turned it into the Big 12 and added some Southwest Conference teams.
Right.
But it really led to 2 conferences that had been major players in college football for decades suddenly changing and being completely different. One went away completely and the other had to merge. And now, almost 20 years later, what do we have? We have another conference, which would be one of the other major conferences back then, the Pac-12, which was the Pac-8 at that time. We have that basically imploding and going away.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I guess if they ask this question in a year from now or 2 years from now, the answer probably could be this right
because
now.
The ACC is probably going to do it too.
Absolutely.
So Frank Broyles' decision to take Arkansas out of one conference and into another conference because he anticipated everything was moving in favor of that conference in terms of TV money, recognition, where you're sitting in terms of the way people view you and all of that. Because he saw that coming, and I don't know that it would, I think it would have happened anyway. So I'm just saying he was ahead of the curve on that.
Absolutely.
But that was the opening shot. And what now has been an ongoing process, and I think it's going to continue. I think you're going to see other conferences continue to, you may not see a conference go completely away, but teams are going to get sloughed off, and they may even merge. We may see the Big 12 somehow merge with the, part of the Big 12 could merge with the Big 10, part could merge with the SEC.
It's going to be a Super 2, not a Power 5. I think it's going to be a Super 2.
And then, as I said a few weeks ago, what happens when the Super 2 merge? And who gets sloughed off then? I mean, you don't want this to happen.
You don't want it to happen.
And I'm not saying that it will, but something has to turn this around.
Absolutely. And we have a little bit of time to talk about a big topic, but we got to move on to the other questions. And Mike, we're running out of time here, so let's run through these. MT Brookhogs asks, do you think we will have less 3-and-outs under Enos' system than Briles' system?
I do, because I think there are more options available to him on third down. I think that's one of the things that got Briles into trouble, is Arkansas was way too predictable on third down, and it was crazy predictable. Number one, it was a typical play that you would see where KJ tries to throw on 3rd and 8 and overthrows somebody. Or you got these crazy wide receiver reverse throwing a pass that would blow up in your face.
Why would you try that on third down? But it's fine.
It didn't work. That was the thing. It was predictable in that it never worked.
Yeah.
So what was predictable there, I think, is going to become unpredictable with Enos for the very same thing I was talking about earlier, because he's got all these components to his offense. You can run the ball, you can throw the ball, you can throw the ball as a running game, you can throw the ball as a passing game. I think he's got he's going to involve the tight ends. You're going to have more 10, 12, whatever they call it, 10, 12 personnel, where you have 2 tight ends on the field. You'll have more of that. There's just more options, and more options is a bigger problem for a defensive coordinator. He's got to consider more things.
Yeah, to keep him guessing, right?
So
That's what he said.
I think they'll be less predictable on third down.
Absolutely. Hot Dogger says, I don't understand the so-called rivalry game with Missouri. Now that Texas is in the same conference, based on the U of A's history with the Longhorn rivalry, do you think the SEC will take a look at maybe promoting a Texas-Arkansas shootout?
I don't think they have to promote it, because we don't know exactly what's going to happen in 2025 when all of this really changes. But we do know that the plan is to create a situation where every other year you play every team. So at the very minimum, Arkansas is going to start playing Texas every year. If in 2025 they come up with 3 permanent opponents instead of 1, Arkansas could end up playing them every year. Arkansas fans who do not remember the Southwest Conference rivalry with Texas, who've grown up in this SEC era in which Arkansas has no true real rival. The closest you probably would come is LSU. That's what average fan would tell you. Yeah, we've had some big games with LSU. There were some big games with Tennessee in the late 90s. But a true rivalry thing, and let me explain rivalries, because people don't understand it. You can be a team can be a rival to you. That doesn't mean that they view you as a rival.
Yeah.
Texas in those Southwest Conference days still looked at Oklahoma and A&M as bigger rivals. It was a bigger deal to their fans. A rivalry is not, and yes, your players react to this, but rivalry is mostly how your fans view other teams. So, for instance, how do your fans react when people try to tell me that Missouri is a rival? I say to them, okay, if Missouri is a rival, then every other team on your schedule is a rival. Yes, you want to beat them. Yes, you get mad if you lose to them, but that doesn't make them a rival. And here's how I know. 2 years ago, Arkansas beat Missouri here. What did the fans do? Did they storm the field? Did they go nutso?
No.
They just kind of went, okay, yeah, we beat those guys, good.
Cool, yeah.
Okay, what did they do when they played Texas, having not played them in several years? And I remember a lot of the talk going into that Texas game was, oh, it's not like in the old days. Fans are younger fans now. They don't remember that old stuff that boomers remember. It's all going to change. That was all said.
No.
Yeah, it was on message boards, on Twitter. Oh, yeah, it's not as big. It's not going to be like it was. And what happened when they won that game? They stormed the field.
Yeah.
It was just like when they stormed the field in Texas in '81. They stormed it. They stormed the field with Tennessee in '99. It was the same thing. They stormed the field when you beat Texas. They don't storm the field when you beat Missouri.
Yeah.
So the point is, you're going to be, if you don't believe this, you're about to be introduced to what a real rivalry is. Because when Texas comes into this league and Arkansas is playing them either every other year or every year, it's going to be huge and you're going to see it. I've said this before, I still think OU can turn into a rivalry type games. Nobody knows for sure because they haven't played each other but a handful of times in all these years. But we're right next to each other. You can get in your car and easily drive to Norman. They can get in their car, easily drive to here. And they're right on the edge of each other's borders. You're going to get a lot of back and forth. And I think that has the potential to become a rivalry too. So my point is, within 3 or 4 years, there won't be any of this nutty discussion about is Missouri a rival.
I hope not, because it makes me so mad. You have all these kids. I mean, they do horns down even when you're not playing Texas.
Exactly.
I have kids like at the College World Series, 2 years ago or a year ago, they were doing horns down to me, and I was like, what? Why? We don't even play Texas. It's like they were like horns down, horns down. Oh, okay, cool.
Exactly.
It was just. It's a big.
It is a thing. And you're going to have to see it to understand it when it happens all the time.
I believe
Not
you.
once in a blue moon, but all the time.
I was on a Florida radio station talking sports, and they were like, "Oh, isn't it weird that Arkansas doesn't play their rivals every year?" And I said, "What do you mean? What do you mean?" They were like, "Well, who does Arkansas play in rivalry week?" And I was like, "Missouri." They go, "Missouri's Arkansas's rival?"
Yeah,
they didn't even know. They said Texas. They said they thought
Exactly.
Texas was. And I
Because
said, well,
even they understood that can't possibly be a rivalry game.
Exactly. So you go outside of Arkansas, you go to other SEC areas, ACC, wherever, they will probably, if you poll random people on the street, they would probably tell you Texas is Arkansas's rival over Missouri, or have no idea.
And I think in 2025, I think what you're going to see is Texas and A&M are going to have the rivalry week game.
I think that'll be
so
great.
How does Arkansas avoid Missouri? They've somehow got to convince, because Texas and OU will probably continue to play each other during that state fair thing. I don't know if they'll stay in Dallas.
Yeah.
But it'll probably be that time of the year. That will leave Oklahoma up to play a rivalry week game with Arkansas, and I would love to see that as opposed to Missouri.
I absolutely would too. Please, Hunter Yurchek, hear our plea. Make it happen, okay? And then this is our final question of the day, and it is from Razor Alex 88, who says, "I'm a little concerned about the new ticket scanning system that the U of A is implementing this season, requiring tickets to be in your mobile wallet, and screenshots and QR codes are no longer valid. Something about a bouncing blue thing. I have tickets in my mobile wallet on my phone, but it is a QR code. I wish they wouldn't make getting through the gates more complicated."
Okay, you're going to explain this because here's
I can.
me. Here's me. I don't even use my phone when I pull up to McDonald's and I see these people going, "Rrr."
Yeah, like scan their phones?
Yeah, I don't do that stuff. I use a credit card, and I wouldn't know how that scan thing works on my phone if I had to. I do know that this all came about, and I was discussing it last night with a former college student, and he believes that what started happening was, and you've experienced this at concerts,
Yes.
where people who have this screenshot send it to other people, and multiple people can get in with this screenshot thing. So you're walking up to be scanned, and you're scanning the screenshot, and it's letting several people in under one ticket.
It's not letting several people in. When one person uses it, Mike, it goes away. But here's the problem. If you're a ticket scalper or a scammer, right,
Okay.
you can send the screenshot out to multiple people. Yeah, here's my ticket. Thanks for paying me $100.
Okay,
and then disappear, right? And they're trying to get in. They're like, why can't I get in?
Sure.
Well, you got the QR code sent to 10 people.
Okay, so the U of A stepped in and instituted something new, and you explained that.
Yeah, it's a really cool technology. Razor Alex 88. It's super simple. It's actually more simple than what you were describing here. I used it when I went to the Taylor Swift concert. Basically, you take your phone, the bouncing blue thing will show up when you're next to a scanner. You take your phone, you wave it, and boom, you're in. I had my phone in my pocket, and the lady said I was already in. She goes, "Oh yeah, we see you, Courtney Mims. Yeah, you're good. You're right here." So I think that is so easy. What it does, which is really cool, you're going, how does it work? How does it stop those scammers from sharing it? Well, what it does is it regenerates the code that is on your phone every minute. So even if you have them on your phone, nobody can steal them, nobody can get some. If you send a screenshot of your tickets to somebody else, it will regenerate and create a new one for you. So it is more secure. It's going to end up working out a lot better in the long run because people won't have people stealing their tickets.
And if you're confused about it, you can go to ArkansasRazorbacks.com, any one of those sports websites. We didn't care. We went to the volleyball site. And they have a thing in there that shows you can download their app. But I think you're saying you don't have to.
You don't have to. The way I did it with the bouncy ticket thing was somebody sent me the ticket, it went into my wallet, and boom, I was all good to go. And the wallet is an app that comes on your phone. But Arkansas has an app to help you with sharing tickets and all of that.
Okay, there's a separate complaint with this issue, and I want to address that because some fans are saying that they never used any of that. They like the printed tickets.
Yeah.
And so what they're saying is the cost of printed tickets is going up, I don't know, I think from $10 to $100. I haven't asked anybody over at Athletic if I don't know if it's that dramatic. But that's what one guy on a message board, I was trying to read this, or maybe it was on Twitter, and he was saying, I used to pay $10, now I'm paying $100. I don't know what that really is. We can find out, I guess.
Yeah, we'll have to look into that.
But here's the interesting thing about printed tickets. I don't want to just blow this off because some people aren't doing the printed tickets because they're like me and dopey and don't know how to use their phone to scan.
Yeah.
Some people like printed tickets. I was talking to a guy last night again. He said, I like to keep ticket stubs. And he said, what if Arkansas beats Alabama this year? It'll be the first time in 16, 17 years that they've won it. I would like to have those ticket stubs, tack them up on my wall, and people come on, hey, look at that. That's the win in 2023 over Alabama. If you had ticket stubs from the 78 Orange Bowl, or if you had ticket stubs from the 1981 Arkansas-Texas game, or whatever. But if you keep doing this screenshot stuff, and most people probably don't care about that, but some people don't like that because you don't have any proof that you did it. What are you going to pull out your screens?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's
you can pull out, look, see, this is where I got in on my phone.
There might be a way to save them because I do agree with you.
Well, it's not like having a ticket that you can tack up on your wall.
You might be able to, and I have to look into this because I still have past tickets from sporting events I've been to. I am that person too. I love to print them out and I love to keep them. But there's a way you can do that with the ticket on the mobile tickets as well.
What does it look like? On a piece of paper like this? Well, that's dumb. That's not like a real ticket.
Well, yeah, but you
it's
still
not like
get
a
to
cool
keep
thing
it.
like you got tickets that you saved from a game 20 years ago.
True.
This is my dad took me to I wish I had tickets. My grandfather took me to the first college football game in 56, I think it was, a Texas Tech, New Mexico game. That was a big deal to me.
Yeah.
If I still had those, oh man, I'd have them somewhere. I'd be saving them, want to pass them on to my grandkids. You know?
Yeah, I have all of my ticket stubs from like when I was in college at Florida games. I kept all of them because they were all like shiny and they made them cool.
And did they have a little ad on them at the bottom about a free Pizza Hut
they didn't
coupon?
have a free. They didn't have a free Pizza Hut
I think the Florida tickets. I remember hearing that on the ticket it was a coupon for like 30% off at the Pizza Hut.
Nope, that wasn't a thing, Mike. I don't know where you came up with that. That wasn't a thing. I'm going to bring in my ticket stubs and show you them to prove that there was no Pizza Hut love on those tickets at all.
They love Pizza Hut in Gainesville.
They don't. We're going to have this argument on next week's.
That's the biggest place to eat in Gainesville after sporting events is the Pizza Hut.
You know what? I'm going to show you
with
all the
a dead
cool
palm
places
tree
to
outside the Pizza Hut.
There's not a dead palm tree outside the
I think
Pizza
the
Hut.
school got mad about that. It was bad for their image, so they bought that land and condemned it and tore it down, so you can't do it anymore.
Nope, not at all. We'll have this debate later on. When they play Florida that week, we'll have this debate. But that's going to do it for this week's Ask Mike. We'll see you next Monday to answer more of your questions.